A lot of VCs and private equity are now just starting to get into the special needs and autism arena. They're very much focused on high level tech. They're thinking of how can we cure autism? How can we give a medication now that can reduce the features of autism? How can we provide technology to help autistic children speak? I think it's a very noble cause. But that doesn't really help the children now that have it, and it doesn't help the parents that are probably drowning a bit and trying to help their child navigate some level of functionality in the world that we currently live in. That's my priority.
Hello and welcome to My Great Pivot, the podcast where we talk to female founders in all stages of the entrepreneurial journey. I'm Carrie Regan, and I'm obsessed with stories of entrepreneurs who risk it all to pursue their dreams. It's a privilege to tell the stories of inspiring female founders. This one hits at a whole different level. Stephanie Angelides is a Peabody Award-winning media executive, producer, writer, and a mom. Several years ago, she was told that her son, who has profound autism, would never be able to perform certain daily activities like showering on his own. Stephanie refused to accept that, knowing it would only make his life more difficult as he grew older. So she started tinkering. What began as a collection of homemade tools has grown into Clean Plus Comfort, an adaptive hygiene brand that helps disabled children and adults gain greater independence. I learned so much from this conversation about the deep need for such tools in the marketplace, why visual storytelling is so critical in designing products for this population, and why getting these products into the hands of the people who need them most is more challenging than you might think. I hope you enjoy this eye-opening and inspiring conversation with Stephanie Angelides. Stephanie, hello, welcome to My Great Pivot. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am so excited to talk to you because you have so much going on. You've spent years as a media executive. You are an award-winning producer. You're an author. But what we're about to talk about today, you are also founder and creator of Clean Plus Comfort. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes. So Clean Plus Comfort is an adaptive hygiene company, and that can be sort of a weird term. People don't know what that means exactly. We take hygiene, so anything having to do in the bathroom, and we create tools and guides that focus on sensory learning. So visual learning, tactile learning, audio receptor learning for children that are either very young, so you can't just tell them what to do, or children who are disabled and transitioning probably later throughout their progress, typical progress, I should say, how to go to the bathroom, how to shower, how to brush their teeth. And so our first product line really focused on shower time, mainly because it's one of the hardest to master because there's so many steps that go into showering. And it's also one of those arenas that if you don't get a full handle on it by a certain age, the chances of actually becoming independent in the shower really reduce down, studies have shown. So we try to, again, focus on all of those tools while making them look fun and entertaining that will hopefully get them to a place where they can shower on their own.
That's amazing. And you have a personal inspiration behind your creation of this product, right?
Correct. So I have a son with tier 3 profound autism. He is labeled as nonverbal, but he has a version of speaking where he mainly talks in movie phrases. So it's memorized lines, especially Pixar films. But we've gotten him to a place where he is able to use a series of response sentences. So he can tell you if there's something that he wants to eat, if there's a place that he wants to go, usually one-word responses. But we've now, if you prompt him, can get a few words out of him in a small sentence. And the reason I bring that up is that was our struggle with getting him to be independent in the bathroom. He could not cognitively process the steps of going potty or showering. And I was told that he was never going to get there. That was not something that he was going to be able to master, and basically guided to implementing the tools that would be those supports like adult diapers, shower tools that caregivers could use to work with him. And I didn't accept that. And so especially during the pandemic, when we were in this hyper closed environment, I took that lockdown as an opportunity to dig in. And I created a lot of these tools originally to help him personally And when we did reach a level of success, I started sharing it just locally, especially with autism moms. We're a bit of a network, and what's working over here, what's happening here, we share, tools and ideas. And then I saw that there was just nothing in the marketplace. And that's why I eventually evolved and turned this into a small company.
Wow. So were you just cobbling things together, little tools with what you had around in the house? And can you give me an example?
Sure. So he really didn't tolerate the shower very well. He did not like the sensory feeling of water hitting his head.
Yeah.
So to get him used to the shower, I created a tool that's essentially a loofah that wraps around a handheld shower head. And what it does is it becomes a diffuser, and you can put the soap and the shampoo directly on that loofah, and it becomes a sponge bath. So I was able to first use it on him directly and then taught him how to use it on himself. And I sell that now as a customized product for people that are in that situation. But that was really the first thing. And then next was the shower curtain, where I outlined all of the steps. So when he was then using this device, okay, where on your body do you wash? What do you start with first? Don't forget to put the product on the loofah. And then eventually evolved out of that, got him to a handheld glove, which is another thing that we make. It's a loofah glove with a loofah ball attached to it. So when he wasn't gripping, if he released his hand, because he has dyspraxia and he has gripping issues sometimes, he didn't drop it. So he was able to still be successful. There was no frustration. And so then again, we moved to the steps of that and just continued to expand on what he was able to do and remove the adaptive tools and then introduce more typical tools along the way.
So you were creating these yourself with a sewing machine and cobbling them together. At what point did you move on to manufacturing them?
So that was the trickiest part. The printed materials was actually the easiest one. I brought in an amazing illustrator, Kristen Keeves. She was fantastic to work with and really understood how to approach some of the imagery to make it very accessible for special education environments and parents that are trying to work at home, while also making it feel premium. A lot of what happens in our environment is it's clip art. And it's up to therapists and teachers to pull together random images from the internet. Now ChatGPT piece them together, but it's not a cohesive image. It's not a recurring character. There is no storyline to follow necessarily. And so getting things like that in place and then translating that into the shower curtain or the glass decal was actually the easiest, because there's an amazing company on Long Island called Spectrum Designs. They employ special needs adults to do a lot of the work. And so I partnered with them to get those first round materials up and running. They did a great job getting the curtain, the decal, the checklist, stickers, all in place. The loofahs were much harder to get people on board because I think they couldn't understand the vision. So it was a lot of hand holding and explaining the why, and then getting them to adjust their machines to be able to handle loofahs. I really needed to get buy-in from two different companies that it was worth working with me on this to get these products to a place where we could make them. But we eventually got there. I think some of the other stuff down the line is going to be a bit easier because it's not as complex, especially as we get into our potty line that's coming out. But the loofahs and sewing together and making those pieces, especially the one foam company, bless their heart, they worked with me for like 2 years.
Well, and this is so amazing. So, to back up a little bit, when you first introduced your son to these tools, did he take to them right away? Did you see progress right away, or was it a process?
So it changed according to the product. The loofah over the shower head was the biggest jump forward because I got him to stand in the shower. There was no screaming. There was no self-interest behaviors, especially when he was a little bit younger. He would hit his face. He would punch himself. He would smack on his chin, which is a very common behavior, especially when they're overwhelmed, then their sensory issues are triggered. So while separately working with him to not do those things and learn to communicate, it was how do I reduce down those stressors? So that loofah that went on the handheld shower handle was great because I immediately reduced down a big trigger for him. So now we're in the shower. He's tolerating it. He's, God forbid, even having a good time and relaxing. So then introducing things after that became easier because he was okay being in there. I think the hardest one that I encountered, because he's fully mastered it now, he showers on his own. He just did it this morning, went in, did his thing, came out. It's getting him to do it thoroughly was the next hardest piece of it. And so that's why I evolved some of our tools from younger characters into more complex photoreal versions for when you get to a certain level. So now instead of having, 6 prompts, 7 prompts on the shower curtain, you can go to a shower curtain that has 14 prompts with very specific pictures. The struggle there is the government puts a big lens on what you're allowed to sell when it comes to images of the body, and especially sell to children. So that was a huge hurdle, is how do I service this community and still be in line with what I'm legally allowed to do? So that was my next big mission, cracking that code.
How did you get around that?
Sometimes I don't. Google just shut me down last week again and removed a bunch of my tags because they felt that what I was selling was inappropriate. It's an algorithm. You get caught up in an algorithm. And so then you have to talk to a human, which is very difficult to do and find, and get your stuff reinstated. This happens a lot on social media too, when I try to bring up a little commercial of a new product or things like that. One of our images is a boy. He's in swim trunks. He's in the shower, but just having that image of him in the shower looking at the shower curtain gets shut down all of the time. And I think that's sort of the struggle in general with these products for this community, is it needs to be hyper specific, but you're not allowed to really sell a lot of it, market it. And so getting the word out and getting to different people is very difficult. But that's why I do a lot of grassroots work. I was in Baltimore, I was in DC, I was in Jersey. I'm going to be making a trip out to California, is getting to people, getting into environments, and then being able to show them what they can do and what these products can help their child achieve.
I really want to get into that whole marketing aspect. But first, did you engage special education experts and people in this area in the creation of these products, or is it your own expertise and your deep research that really help shape these products?
It's a combination. So I have taken lots of courses and programs over the years, including becoming a registered behavior technician for my son specifically. Like, that was always my goal. I'm doing this for him. But then it would eventually evolve into that work then played out in some of the materials that I was creating. But as I was creating them, if I would get to a place where I was like, okay, this feels good, I would run it by an OT that I worked with. I would have, like, the book definitely went out to a bunch of people in different districts and backgrounds. I still do these little sort of test runs on smaller groups that are within special education, whether it's a teacher, it's a therapist that does homework, or people who are in group home settings. So I try to really get the different perspectives in play. But yes, it begins with me and my personal work and experience. And then I enhance it by bringing those additional voices.
And I saw that on your website too, where you ask people if you've had difficulty with some tools that just aren't working for you and your child or your family member or your loved one. Let us know, because I imagine some of the great ideas are coming from your audience as well, who's giving you that feedback and saying, well, this was great, but we would love to have something like X.
So this is where I become a terrible businesswoman. Not to throw myself under the bus. But if I don't have it or if I can't accomplish it, I tend to link people up with other entities immediately. And so I'll tweak some of my stuff, but I'll give you a great example. There was it's a little bit graphic. I'm sorry, your audience might not love this, but there was a 17-year-old boy that they were really trying to get to transition to showers. And he was having a problem where he was going to the bathroom in the shower. They didn't know if he was becoming relaxed, but then he would see the poop and he'd be like, oh, look at this. And so I worked with her and linked her up with a woman on Etsy that does custom bath bombs and created custom bath bombs so that he would then have these cool looking poop bath bombs and they would turn into gold flecks and all this stuff. And it was something he could then use, and because it was soap in the shower. and he's doing phenomenal now. And they've transitioned away from those, but it helped with this bridge of getting him there and getting him to tolerate it and understand, okay, this behavior is existing in a different way. Same for another mom who needed something that was very specific. I knew a company that did something similar. I put her in touch with them to be able to make those modifications. Because we're dealing with such a ticking clock, and if these kids are in a zone where they're learning, don't wait for me. I would love to be the person that sells you the product that's helpful. But if I can't make it happen for you, let's tap into the network and let's get you to the person that can so you can achieve and be successful, and so can your child.
I love that. It's this community that's helping one another. I imagine people are steering customers your way as well.
You know, it's interesting at the resource fairs that I go to, which is that grassroots approach. I hear from a lot of local providers. So, especially providers that are at home therapists or have a facility. And by therapist, I mean OT speech, ABA, behavioral. And then I hear from a lot of group homes. I'm working on the portion of my business where I can loop my products into their environment. It's easier in group homes because it's almost like a one-time sale. Like I'm working with a lot of special needs camps and getting the curtains there. But how do I get those turnover environments where it's like I'm bringing my child in for an hour twice a week? How do I get my stuff in there to show them how we can be helpful and then create a sales model where then they can purchase off the back of that? So that's something that I'm still trying to navigate and figure out how can I best utilize my personal resources and their expertise and access in those little micropods.
Yeah. Does it get difficult when you know that this is a population that really needs these goods, balancing the passion with the profit, knowing that you need the profit in order to continue pursuing this passion and
Yes,
this important work?
it's a great point. I give some stuff away for free, especially if I think it's someone that, is hesitant to purchase because they can't afford it. My goal is to really try to get into some of these state agencies. If these state agencies are hearing me, to get pre-approved on the list for OPWDD, which is the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities in New York. Here we have something called self-direction budgets. And those budgets can pay sometimes for tools, especially shower tools. Get some of my stuff on there so if parents can afford it, which is usually the case because parents of special needs children, especially high level special needs children, it's not like they have extra cash flowing around. These budgets can help offset that so they can help purchase some of these tools. That's one of the things that I'm also trying to figure out is how can I get on these lists, get pre-approved. It makes it a little bit easier in terms of access. I definitely had someone this past weekend that needed a bundle and she just did not have the money and wanted a payment plan, and I just gave it to her. I'm a terrible businesswoman sometimes. I was like, just take it. So I need to sort of balance that and make sure I'm still getting the sales in other places so I can continue to give away some free stuff.
You make sure you write that off as an in-kind
I
on
know,
your
right? I
taxes.
got to keep track of everything. But yes, it is the other sort of trick of what I'm trying to do because people are like, well, why weren't you a nonprofit? Being a nonprofit and selling goods is a very complicated arena. And additionally, I want to work with nonprofits. So, like Spectrum Designs is a nonprofit. There's a couple of nonprofits on Long Island that I'm working to set up. I just wrote an article today about how the transition from being in a school setting to adulthood is very difficult with special needs children, like in their 20s, that are now all of a sudden they had all this structure and they have nothing. There's some amazing groups, especially on Long Island, that help with transitions, getting them to be essentially employees where they can help with the stickers and the hang tags and some of the packaging. My goal for this company is not just to sell to families and help children in need. How do I then employ some of these now adults and children that will become adults? Get involved in those PACE labs, teach how to do some of this work so that they can have an environment that keeps them in some level of consistency and feels rewarding to them.
Which is incredible because I imagine you could offshore that work and get it done a lot cheaper, but you're just continuing the mission of the company by employing these people.
Correct. Yes, we just did a little bit of a run of, oh, actually, I have one right here. My son keeps putting them all over the house. They've been gluing little fidget spinners onto suction cups just to get like the sense of how glue guns would work and like how to be able to do some of the other materials because you have to teach them slowly. So it's called PACE Labs, PAES. And they learn step by step, like how to put wrappers on hamburgers if they're going to be working in fast food, how to put pencil kits together. So I have to start the process now so they can get those steps down, start to teach them, and then hopefully get to a place where I can employ them. So I have some time as I build up the company, but we had to start it early.
Yeah, again, such a range of benefits to this community, not only with the products you produce, but the manufacturing process in terms of skills development, and for them to be able to generate income for themselves as well
Yes.
in adulthood, which is just amazing. Now, you have a range of products. You touched on, of course, the shower curtains and the loofahs and the handheld loofahs, the glove, the books. You mentioned the books as well. I can see where your background as a storyteller has also influenced this business. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So the book was something that started off as what's called a social story. And a social story is something that we use with children to teach them the steps of something that they're meant to accomplish or keep them safe or sometimes to avoid through a combination of pictures and words. And so it started off really just with the shower sections of the book that you see now that I created for my son. And I decided to expand upon it. And what I ended up doing was researching, okay, what else exists in the world of shower time. And when I went to many libraries and bookstores and research online, there's some stuff, even for typical children, but there's nothing that gives you a step by step guide. So I thought that was interesting. And then I was like, maybe I should lean in, but let me see what else exists in the world of kids with autism and books, just in general. And when I did that deep dive, I was a little surprised that there aren't a lot of books that are made specifically for a special needs child reading to see themselves reflected in the book.
Mm.
There's books about them, there's books for typical children to learn about a child that has autism or special needs. There are books to explain how to navigate a child that has autism or special needs, but there's nothing that's really, I'm a child in this book and this is written for me. So that's when I decided to make that happen. Keeping it in a lyrical way that my son would find engaging was the most difficult part. So I could tell when I was losing him. So I rewrote it a bunch of times. It doesn't rhyme, but it is meant to be lyrical in flow. And we talk about a boy that's very much like him and loves his headphones and his reward charts and his stickers and how he learns. But what I did really was in the environment of the pages was leave those little Easter eggs that these kids will see. So like my son's an eloper, which means he runs away. And for many years, we had a stop sign by the door. You know, little things like that, that another family or another child might be like, oh, I recognize that. That makes sense. That I see that in my home. So I really tried to put those pieces in there. And that's when the illustrator, Kristen, was amazing. But I think that that was a bit of a love letter to my son. Like, let me put this out into the universe. And then we translated it very easily into Mali to make sure that girls had an access point as well. And now we are in the midst of working on a version that is translated into Spanish to be able to have that both in Mali and Matt as well.
This is great. It's such an indication of why representation is so critically important. And not only critically important, but it makes good business sense. Here is an underserved audience that really needs this tool, and you've created it. You've filled a market need in a way that no one else had. And what tremendous understanding you brought to the process as well, bringing those personal elements to the design of the book. And your illustrator, did she have experience with this community as well?
No, not really. She had done some work, but she came actually more from an animation background. We both came from the same arena. So it was fun to work with her because a lot of the language that I was using or the approach in which I was taking made sense to her because she came from that sort of media background. But what I think was most interesting was, again, in my process with her with the research was Also, a lot of children's books, at least as of late, it's not actual characters, they're animals representing something. And I think that
Mm.
that also makes it really hard for this particular community because while they may like to see that and they may engage again, especially with Pixar animation and things like that, you don't necessarily know how to translate it to something that's functional in your world because you don't see that as yourself. So it was really how do we craft everything in these pictures that then can translate into, oh, that's me or this is happening in my environment. Because a lot of kids, like my son, are very literal,
Mm.
like super literal. So the second I would say something or use a term that wasn't hyper specific, he would be lost. And so that includes some of the imagery that I was putting together. So I tried to take that into focus as much as possible throughout the process.
Yeah, and I mean that's just such a perfect example. Somebody who doesn't have experience with this community wouldn't necessarily understand that using animals as a metaphor for humans, it just wouldn't do the job. That people in this community aren't going to make that connection.
Mhm.
And again, such an apt illustration of why that kind of representation and involving people with your kind of experience in creating these products is so important. I imagine you also see a lot of products that are designed for this community that are just way off.
Way off. Or the thing that always makes me sad is it just feels like no effort was put into the aesthetics of the product.
Mhm.
Everything feels so clinical or drab or almost like a prototype that they're like, okay, let's just mass market this. There's no effort that's put into let me catch their eye in the store. Let's put some pride behind this. So if they're going with their family to sleep over their aunt's house for Christmas or 4th of July, that the products they're bringing with them look aesthetically pleasing and nice. I have an older typical daughter, and between like the drunk elephant products and the stuff for everything's coming in these fancy bottles and these cool containers and these interesting setups, and that just doesn't exist for my son. So that also was something that I wanted to change. Like, let's make it look nice. Let's make it look cool and interesting and let him have pride in his products.
Yeah, I love that. How old are your kids?
My daughter's going to be 15 in a couple of weeks, and then my son is 12 and a half.
Okay. Does he have any formal role with the company? Do you have him down in your research and development?
Not
Uh,
yet. So he will be, but he did help with a couple of the little images that are inside the book. So my hope is I can get him in the next printing a small illustrator royalty or something like that. I have to educate myself on tax law and what's allowed and what's allowed when you're special needs and you get government funding for some of your education, your programs. There's all these little interesting things to navigate. So it's sounds so simple, but at the same time, I'm like, will this trigger a tsunami of problems if I do the following? That's what I think of on a daily basis. Navigating the potential pitfalls of making what I think is a strategic decision related to anything having to do with just this business. TV's easy compared to this.
yeah. Yeah. I imagine that the simplest thing could really not only disrupt your business, but kill it. Reputationally, too, you have so much to worry about in this industry, too. Trust means everything.
Trust means everything. I get a little bit of grace on some stuff because then I tell people if something doesn't work exactly or maybe falls apart, so something that one of our team members has glued, because again, we're working with people who have some level of disability or cognitive delay, let us know. Like I will replace it immediately. Knock on wood. I really don't want to jinx myself. In the months that I've been operating, I have not had one single return and I have not had one single complaint. So I think that that's a huge win. And I follow up with people. I ask their permission. I say, listen, can I follow up with you in a couple months? Can you let me know how it's holding up? If it's working, that's great. But also, is the functionality of the item still there? And so far, happy to say it's been good.
That's great. So before your market research that you did was sort of informal among parents, other parent groups and teacher groups and different clinics that you were involved in. And now you're actually able to get that feedback from actual clients.
Yes, consumer feedback is very, very helpful. The biggest thing I hear from everyone is, can you tweak this for me? And that's the hardest thing. So I have a running sort of side list. And if I get enough people where it makes sense to redo the print in a certain way or to make an alternate version, because then it also needs to be financially reasonable for that person. Like if I were to do a bespoke shower curtain, that's like $60. No one wants to spend $60 on a custom shower curtain liner. But if I can get like 10 people, it's just going to cost, I think, like $3 more to redo that one print because I already own the liners. Then it makes it a little bit easier. So I run this very interesting sort of line of I want to make tweaks for you. Let me just make it so you can afford those tweaks.
Yeah, and this was another challenge that I wanted to ask about. This population, the way that autism manifests, and I am by no means an expert in this, but I imagine the means by which it manifests is so different for each child. And so, how do you create products that are general enough to speak to enough of them, but not so general that they don't become effective for the majority of them?
Sure. So I think, that's when it comes down to, and I sometimes when I'm explaining the product line, the categories, I really start with the first question when I'm talking to a parent. Does your child tolerate being in the shower? If they can, then that starts me off on a track of a conversation here. If they can't, that's when we go like, okay, let's talk about the custom loofah. Let's talk about the sensory toys that we can put in, or who can I introduce to this conversation, like the woman that makes the bath bombs. So that takes me in a different way. But if they can, that's when it's like, okay, well, where are they at? Are they able to follow two-step directions, three-step directions? And occasionally parents will pull up their IEP, which is an individualized education plan, and it shows where their goals are, but it also gives a baseline of, okay, they've mastered the following. So I know that they can understand this, or they're at a place where a goal for next year is three-step directions. And so that's helpful. I think my favorite conversations are parents that come over and they ask, what do you do? And I say, right now this is about hygiene independence and this is about shower independence. And those parents say, thank God we got that done. I don't have a problem with that. And I'm like, amazing, because it really is one of the hardest ones to master. People always think it's potty time. Being able to shower independently is one of the top things. If you can't, keeps you out of certain group homes when you get older. It significantly limits your work possibilities when you get older. It prevents you from being able to participate in a lot of the community events when you get older. And it's one of your highest risk scenarios when you get older because you are fully declothed, unlike when you're going to the bathroom, and you are requiring hand-to-hand contact from a caregiver. So that's why I really tried to focus on this one first, because people don't realize that it is one of the hardest and most complicated.
Wow, you took on the hardest one first. Do you feel like as your son gets older, it's going to inform your product development as well?
I think so. One of the biggest things I hear from providers and parents, because I ask, what else would you want to see? Is almost nothing outside of one little guide exists as a puberty manual for children on the spectrum. They don't understand what's happening to their bodies. It can create levels of aggression and confusion. They don't understand why hair is growing on their face. They don't understand periods. So educating them on to what's happening on their body is one thing. Creating a manual of stuff for parents to look out for is another. And then the tools to help assist both sides. None of that exists. So I started creating some roadmaps, but that I would need someone to come in and say, we're going to fund development of this. So I'm looking into some educational institutions because a lot of that is more educational based. And then the tools would probably be something I, as Clean Plus Comfort, would develop separately. But that's my number one I've heard from everyone is puberty guides and how to handle it.
And again, somebody who isn't involved so deeply on a daily basis with this community, something that people generally wouldn't think about, but that is such an incredible need.
Yes. I mean, a great example is I was talking to a woman that the biggest problem, so she runs a series of special education environments from schools to clinics, is that teenage girls on the spectrum, they teach them to use pads. The number one problem that they have is that they will always put the pad upside down. And so I'm working now with another company to see about creating a two-tone pad so that they know that the color will always go down. So again, another visual cue, like yes, Okay, purple on the bottom, pink on the bottom, whatever color they tells me is going to be easiest. But that's where you always put that base down. So it's little things like that that a mainstream company, tiny tweaks that they could do that then makes that product accessible for this population.
Something so simple, but just takes somebody with the right knowledge to be able to come in and point that out. I also noticed on your website, and you mentioned checklists, you also sell these reinforcers. Is that a product that you've created, or is that a product you're reselling?
So the imagery and the steps are all ours. What we did is we went to the marketplace, and again, this is where Spectrum Designs became very helpful. So we don't have to recreate the wheel each time because that can be very hard for children in this particular learning spectrum. What can we take that's a tool that they maybe recognize, that they understand, and then how do we tweak it and apply it to this scenario? So a lot of the actual formatting of these reusable checklists exists, and people use them for different things. All we did was, again, consistency and repetition in learning. The same images that are in the book that are on the shower curtain are in that checklist, that are on the stickers that can go on your bottles. So instead of the child having to process your words or read words and maybe not understand them, they just have to look at that picture. Boom, that picture. Then I move to that same picture. It's basically like connect the dots. I just have to find picture number one, move it to the next picture number one, move it to the next picture number one, move to the next picture number one. And then I can go to picture number two, picture number two. So it makes it easier for those visual learners that just need to see that repeated image to know where to go. It's like, remember that game, Simon, and you had to follow the light?
Yes.
It's a little bit like that, except it's just you're following that same picture from tool to product, and then you move on to the next one.
And you have that consistency and you're building that common visual language then.
Yes,
The
exactly.
the reinforcers that I saw, it looked like it was this plastic tool that you would hang up in the shower and you would slide little buttons when something was done. So that was something that already existed, the plastic part of it in the marketplace, and you applied different stickers to it.
Correct. So we actually worked with a company that makes that, and they custom made because normally it comes with like just like sleeves that you can write with Sharpie on. And so what they did is they custom made for us the actual, and they put they adhere it to the inside and then they fuse it all together, are images of the entire process of showering from before you get in to when you get out, every single step. That was cool to do and see come to life. And we're actually in the midst of tweaking it because the original version had like a little thin film of plastic, and then that plastic was bubbling, so people didn't like it. So we removed the plastic. And now people are like, well, we want it to be able to be physically in the shower. So we're in the midst of making a version that's actually almost like a plexi that
Mm.
will go in there. And again, we're working with that same company to make that happen. Some places, especially knowing the mission, are game. They're like, let's figure it out. Other places, not so much, but that's okay. Everyone can do business the way that they want to. But yes, that particular checklist is also meant to be portable. So if it needs to go to school and the school wants to work with them on that and review, because another thing is recall, having children tell you what they did in the morning can be very difficult, or what they did yesterday. So if all of a sudden that checklist can go in and they can show their teacher that they did 7 out of the, whatever steps, because the teacher can see how many toggles have been slid over, that gives them prompts to be able to ask questions and engage the child and try to get them to have conversational language.
This is also incredible. It almost feels like you've gone and gotten a PhD in this subject while developing all this, but you had a full-time job at the same time, correct?
Correct. So that's why it took so long. I think the first tool I ever created, I went back and I tried to look. I think I first wrote the social story in like 2019. And the first shower curtain, I think, was 2020, maybe 2019. And then I had been working on that loofah all throughout that time. So the loofah, we have a photo series. There's been like 90 different prototypes probably of its evolution. And the first version, again, I think it was like 2019. So I didn't actually start selling until November of 2025. And it took a couple of years before that to actually get all of the pieces to a place where they could be, sold to other people. So it was very much a labor of love over a prolonged period of time to be able to make it come to fruition.
And has this been all self-financed or have you gotten any grants to help along the way and whatnot?
Self-financed, no grants. Grants are a very tricky thing in this particular sphere. A lot of development doesn't go towards products per se. And I was actually just covering the IACC meeting the other week in DC, which is that committee that was created to counter the federal approach to autism. And an interesting conversation came up there where a lot of VCs and private equity are now just starting to get into the special needs and autism arena, but they're very much focused on high level tech. And what I built this business on is low level home entry. This is not for a clinical setting. This is not for a doctor to be using and then you watching. This is for parents to feel empowered at home to help their child. Now, that doesn't mean we're not enhancing the work that is being done by a therapist or, utilizing an ABA therapist in the process of this. Absolutely. But we needed those sort of very simple entry points. And so getting a grant for something like this, a lot of that doesn't exist. It's not there. People aren't thinking of it in that way. They're thinking of how can we cure autism? How can we give a medication now that can reduce the features of autism? How can we provide technology to help autistic children speak? None of it feels behavioral focused or like those life skills that we really need for our children right now.
Yeah. Do you feel like they're just chasing the big payoff in where they're placing those bets?
For sure. I mean, listen, I get it. Everyone wants to be the person that's like, I've solved it. I've cracked fixing all autism, or we know why it happens. It will never happen again. They all want that. And I think it's a very noble cause, but that doesn't really help the children now that have it. And it doesn't help the parents that are probably drowning a bit and trying to help their child navigate some level of functionality in the world that we currently live in. That's my priority. Let's get to a place where we're helping the children that exist now. But I totally am on board with helping to stop it from happening in the future or reducing it down, whatever's possible.
And even for those who are chasing profit, I imagine that's still a pretty generous market that you're talking about. These parents who want tools that aren't just clinical looking and that are far more effective, like the ones that you're creating.
I think the problem is there are so few companies that are doing it that parents don't know these opportunities exist. Every single time I have gone out, everyone's like, this is such an amazing idea. Nothing like this exists. To me, that's mind blowing because this should have existed for 20 something years. The problem is a lot of these parents don't even know to go and shop for products specifically. Sensory toys, yes, they've cracked that market. You can sell them sensory toys. Some behavioral reinforcer like jump pads and spinners and all of that, yes. But tools to help you accomplish an ADL skill, there is no central informational portal for that because there just aren't that many companies that are focused on it and there aren't that many products.
ADL, the activities of daily life. Is that
Yeah.
what that is? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all about those daily life skills. And so that's been one of the hardest things of what I do is even the resource fairs that I've been to, parents are like, so what happens? You come to the home or you sell this to like my OT therapist. I'm like, no, you can buy this. This is all accessible to you. Their mind is so blown that there's a product that they can purchase. They don't it because it's so foreign to them. And that a lot of what I'm doing is just educating them like this is accessible to you. I'm trying to make it financially feasible and try to offset that. But these are things that you can take into the home and use yourself. I think in 5 of the resource fairs I've been to in the past 2 months, I'm the only person that was selling a product.
Wow. Wow.
There's a huge one in Baltimore, not in Baltimore, it's just north of Baltimore. It's going to be like over 1,000 people in attendance, over 200 vendors. And I would have been one of the only product-based ones. I can't go. But it's also interesting on the flip side that a lot of these summits and these conferences won't allow product-based businesses to go in. So like the big one that happens in New York City, they won't let me go in because they don't want products sold to families.
Is it just services then that people are marketing or?
Correct.
And why the resistance to selling these products?
I think that they have it in their heads that it's predatory,
Mm.
that it is like a cash grab, but at the same time, you need tools. You need accessible tools in the home. OT therapy is great, but what happens when that OT therapist leaves after 45 minutes?
Yeah.
What are you, the parent, doing to follow up on any of that? They're not leaving you with a bunch of products. They're not setting you up and outfitting your bathroom. It's just you having to watch them during the session and then hopefully repeat what they're doing. But again, you don't have any of the guides or tools to be able to help that child. So it doesn't really make sense to me. Unfortunately, that happens when you're an early player in the game. You have to sort of help pave the road a bit. And no one has necessarily been mean or absolutely not. It's more been, no, that doesn't happen here, or that's not the way we do it. And so I've been having to have a lot of almost like pitch meetings where you pitch them like, well, let's talk about it. Let's figure out why it's not a good fit. Maybe there's a way to pivot and figure out how it can be a fit. So a compromise I made with another one was I'm not physically going, but I've sent some of my products in flyers and they're going to have them there. So the pressure of me trying to talk to parents doesn't exist. But then if they wish to stop by and see what it's all about, the stuff will be there. That's when becoming a TV exec is very helpful because you hear no like 99.9% of the time, especially as a TV developer. My ideas were consistently rejected. I'm Teflon. I don't know if any, I think all like those wires of hurt feeling died a long time ago. So now I'm just very mission oriented.
God, it's such a battle for something that is such a gift to these parents potentially.
It's interesting. And again, I think it's because they all come from a clinical setting. So a lot of people running these things are clinicians or work with clinicians, come from a medical background. So, on one hand, I'm dealing with that. And then on the other hand, I'm dealing with, like Meta and Google and all of these entities that are like, oh, you're putting out things that are potentially predatory. And then over here, you're potentially dealing with something that's predatory towards parents who would buy anything. But there has to be a space where these companies can exist for parents that have the need and want something and want to be able to use it in the home setting. So again, I'm sort of stuck between these two very firm, narrow walls, but there is a small ravine in the middle that I'm just sort of paddling down.
Wow. And are there any bigger manufacturers who you feel are doing it right, are navigating that line, who you would want to partner with? Or is that just you really are a pioneer in this landscape?
So there's people who have a la carte products. So there is a lovely gentleman who created a company called Youth Cruise, which is diapers for children who age out of typical pamper diaper sizes. And then the toothbrush arena definitely has a lot of people in that place with these vibrating trays and foaming toothpaste. But when it comes to one company who is saying we want to make products that are accessible in the home for children with special needs, there's nothing. It doesn't exist. So my hope is that eventually I can grow my company. I've pitched a couple of these other companies into at least a marketplace. I don't need to take a cut, but like at least let's put your products here so they can find you. And we can start to say to parents, just come here and we become a one-stop shop of anything that you might need for your child, whether it's, adaptive tools in the kitchen, like plates with suction cups so they can't throw it, adaptive cups themselves, certain kinds of straws that have a little chewy on the end of it so that they can't bite through the straw. All of those things are sort of a lofty goal of mine. Can we get it all into one place? But obviously, I have to start with building my own company and focusing on hygiene first.
Yeah. How much of your time is this occupying? Do you still have that day job on the side where you're trying to balance building this business with still bringing in enough money to basically live?
Okay, so this is the deal. One of the pros and cons of having a son with profound tier 3 autism is several days a week, he wakes up about 2 a.m. and he never goes back to bed, which means that I am up at 2 a.m. So I get a lot done. I survive off of coffee. I still work in production. I have some very supportive producing partners, and it's been helpful because I had a medical incident a couple of years ago, which really reduced my ability to work directly in the industry the way that I did before. So I would say that I sort of, between all of the pieces, I'm able to create a very lovely puzzle. But my hope is that one can sort of take the lead. They're all sort of like I get a little bit here, I get a little bit there, and I just have to see which one is going to, take over my time at any given moment. The other thing with Clean Plus Comfort is because I work with so many companies that do the supportive pieces of it, a lot of what I do is obviously research and development, the ideation portion of it, and then creating the partnerships and then the marketing and getting out there and the education of it all. But the good news is I'm not doing the printing. I'm not doing the packaging of some of those things. I've created those partnerships, so it's not as much of a heavy lift as a traditional product-based company is.
Does it pay for itself? Are you able to at least cover your own expenses in terms of, especially those marketing costs, which if you're traveling to these resource fairs, I imagine can add up?
So in terms of the monthly expenditures, yes, but have I made back all of my original investment? No. I think that's probably going to take about 2 years. I think that that's what I'm looking at for my recoup time. But do I cover all the costs of going to these places and turn a small profit when I do them? Yes. And then I just reinvest that back in. Again, it's really like a slow climb in these educational runs, but my goal is that more the B2B, so like the camps, the group homes, the partnerships with the larger entities like an AHRC, hopefully eventually OPWDD. Those are the things that are going to let me then go to the resource fairs and say, hey, if you can't afford this, we now have a version of our company where you can put in for like a small grant here and we can get you X, Y, and Z. That's where I'm trying to trend this towards. But a lot of those places want to see that it's working in the open market and that it's functional in homes. So I'm in sort of that builds the blocks up and showing each side that this is working and that there's a need for this to be able to get to those larger B2B contracts.
Yeah. And like you said, I imagine that so much of the research that's being done and say these tests that are being done in clinical settings are for the more high tech tools and not for these low tech solutions. So, in other words, there might be studies being done about the use of AI in building communication tools, but one that's all about reinforcers or shower curtains and storytelling as a tool for helping build these behaviors. That's not necessarily going to be something that a university is going to be investing in researching.
Correct. I mean, anything that's low tech and accessible in the home is not considered a win at that level. No one's going to write and get an award-winning paper or thesis off of a storytime shower curtain. But could we help a lot of children start to understand the steps of shower time? Absolutely. And so that's why I'm targeting the people that are in the trenches a bit. Who are those therapeutic groups, the caregiver teams that are giving access to even the financial intermediaries, big companies like AIM or Robinhood, if Robinhood is listening, or AIM, they are the big money companies that handle a lot of these self-direction budgets and larger grants. How do we get to helping in the home? Not a caregiver getting to the home, the actual tool is getting into the home because it just doesn't really exist very much right now.
I remember you telling me that a lot of this came about during COVID when caregivers couldn't go into your home. You would think that post COVID, people would realize how critical these sorts of self supporting tools are.
In my view and in my experience, there's a gap when it comes to what the money makers think is helpful and then the reality of what is helpful. And I won't go into a deep dive, but I think this is actually why we lose a lot of, there's a big shortage of special education teachers right now and special education therapists. There's no system even for them. There is no cohesive learning curriculum A lot of it's reusing tools that's used in a typical classroom with modifications. I don't think a lot of effort has been put into those practical boots on the ground materials. And I think, there's a website, I'm totally blanking on it, but I think it's called Teacher for Teacher, or it's something where teachers put out their own stuff. And it's become a marketplace a bit. And it's a lot of paperwork essentially, but social stories, things like that for typical and also special education. And it's interesting because part of the reason that that's doing so well is because these sort of larger groups haven't said, oh, we have to get them the tools that they need. This is a curriculum that you can use here. These are access points if the child's struggling with this. It just doesn't really exist on a larger scale with special education. I think that that's the problem also on the home side. If it's not even existing necessarily in the classroom, and each teacher is having to again pull clip art and search for stuff and use YouTube videos, and there isn't something that's cohesive for them, it's definitely not going to be cohesive in the home.
So frustrating. Again, thinking of all the money that's pouring into these moonshot tools, that something like this that is lower tech, maybe lower profile, but really effective and really necessary, doesn't get the funding and attention that it needs. If somebody came forward with, say, angel investment, would you want outside investment at this stage? Or does it just bring more complications you feel than it's worth?
I think it would depend on the person, what they were hoping to achieve in investing, and what they could offer beyond money. Because a lot of what I want to do is disruptive to the chain of education and product development for this specific ecosystem. I can't even tell you how life-changing it would have been if I had gotten sort of a packet of when he's 3, introduce this, when he's 4, introduce this. And all of his therapists and his teachers were on the same page, and there were toolkits that went with them. If something like that existed, it would have probably been life-changing with how I approached dealing with educating my son on certain, especially life skills. But those don't exist. And so if I had an investor that was like, hey, here's money, but let's partner, but let me invest and let's get that setup going. This is how I can help you. This is an infrastructure I already have in place with one of the other companies I invest in, or this is something I've been able to achieve before. I would love that. But I don't know if a lot of investing happens that way anymore. It just seems
Yeah.
to be more like, I see that you might be able to make, this amount of money in this amount of years, and I'm going to give you money so I can get in early. And it's a little bit like the stock market. You're rolling the dice. Like maybe it becomes a huge win, maybe it doesn't. And I don't know if I'm the best person, but also brand for that kind of investment.
Yeah. Yeah. You need someone who's more focused on the impact versus the payoff, the profit.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And maybe somebody out there is listening and they can bring that. Who knows? But it is such a noble endeavor. Did you have any formal business training going into this?
Probably a mistake. But I did do a lot of research. I have many a books here. In fact, I'm staring at one right now. I really just tried to translate a lot of the business tools that I had from when you become an executive of a certain level in media. I was helping with contract negotiations and going over all of that and coming up with pipelines and funding of those pipelines, like where are we allocating and making sure that we don't run dry in certain areas. So like how to take a budget, manage it, apply it. Yes. Did I know about all of the other little pieces, especially like tax pieces and things like that? No, but I learned quickly. And then I think the manufacturing, I really just trusted some people that I was very close with that have run product-based businesses before. So I very much guilted many people into working for me for free by just like helping me with stuff.
Work that guilt. No,
Exactly.
when you came out publicly about this on LinkedIn, that's how I found out about you and these products. Did more people come forward to help? What was the response?
Okay, so social media is a very interesting place. It was a beautiful response. Many people wrote me. They were very lovely. It doesn't lead to anything. There's nothing necessarily actionable that has come out of anything from social media. I mean, like in terms of, oh, we love this, we support you. People have purchased stuff from me via social media, even though I really tried to discourage that. It's hard not to become linked to TikTok Shop, especially when you have a Shopify platform. Like they really nudge you into making those partnerships. but I try to bring everyone to the website just for disclaimer purposes, and it's more financially reasonable on Shopify. But going back to your original question, did anyone end up helping me off that? A gentleman I used to work with gave me some lovely advice, and I asked him a bunch of questions about like the aesthetics of the company and how to handle some of that. We had a nice back and forth, but that was it. There was lots of people that said we would love to help. And then in my follow up with them, I never heard anything.
Well, that brings us to the Female Founders Wish List, where we ask female founders what's one item, it could be a product, it could be a service that would transform your business today, or at least make life easier for you, something of reasonable value that somebody might be able to fulfill. What would be on your Female Founders Wish List?
Okay. So we've touched on it a few times. I don't know what the title of this person would be. I would love help from someone in navigating the internet and the rules of the algorithm when it comes to combining the terms shower, special needs, and child, because that seems to be a combination that is foreboding in the internet. And that's one of my biggest problems is I keep getting shut down and pulled from platforms. One of my Facebook pages is permanently banned, and all I did was talk about this company. So who is that? There has to be someone that has some level of expertise in navigating these terms. I mean, I've used every combination under the sun, or a way to go about it differently that I can try to access people in different parts of the country without running into this problem repeatedly. And it's every platform. Even when I was trying to use Higgsfield to create the sort of like a little title page for a new product, all I had on there was the timer in the shower, and they said not safe for work, and they wouldn't do it. So it's very complicated. Anything having to do with children and the bathroom and the rules of that, specifically the shower. Potty stuff has been much easier, which seems wild to me. So again, I don't know what the title of that person would be. You're an expert, whoever you are. You have an amazing skill set, and I would love to learn more about what you do.
And if somebody has that expertise, you can let us know. You can go to mygreatpivot.com and click on wish list up top, and that will bring you to a form that you could fill out and let us know you're out there and ready to help Stephanie. Or you could reach out to her directly at Clean Plus Comfort. What is next for Clean Plus Comfort? You mentioned the potty line.
So we're working on some really cool stuff for potty time. You know, there's lots of tools out there. So we tried to focus on the tools that, number one, aren't out there, but really address issues that people don't think about. So we have some cool stuff coming, some fun stuff. We have branded toilet paper where our characters are on every sheet showing you how it works. So you don't need the book in front of you. So it's almost like a story right there. So you know how many pieces to take so you don't clog the toilet. You know how to wrap it around your hand and use it. But then we're also working on a wet one that is actually like a mitten. So for kids that can't grip. So it's a wet one that they just have to slide on. And it, again, will teach them those tools. And then I think my favorite thing is there's a little soft foam piece that we're very close on that will adhere to the back of the toilet that becomes a guide for the child. So they just have to follow that down. And then there's a little ridge at the bottom that tells them where to stop. And that's where they learn to wipe up. So again, it's all those other senses, the visual learning, the tactile learning, because just telling them what to do and then them processing that, it doesn't really work. So how do we problem solve?
That's incredible. And I imagine these tools could be useful for anyone who's potty training children.
Correct.
So a broad market for that item as well. Thank you so much. For any women out there who see a need, it could be in their household with their child, just in their daily life, that they think there's a market for this. There's got to be more people who face this problem. I'd love to help solve this problem for others. And they want to launch their own business. What advice would you have for them?
I would say, number one, trust your gut. If you feel like it's something that helped you and could help others, lean into that. Number two, do your research. Scour the internet, sales catalogs, make sure it doesn't exist. And then number three, talk to someone who's done it before and learn all about the stuff to do, but the stuff to avoid. Because even if you do that, like I did that, and I've made some mistakes along the way. But I think, we need a lot more female entrepreneurs out there I know there's some amazing entrepreneurs of all ages that are absolutely killing the game right now, but I think there could definitely be a lot more, and there's a huge marketplace out there.
To that end, you mentioned you launched this in November 2025 after working on it for a number of years. If you could go back in time and warn yourself about something, what would it be? What would you warn yourself to do or not to do?
I would probably warn myself to believe that I'm capable of doing a lot of the harder stuff myself. I outsourced some things that now in retrospect was a waste of money, and I definitely could have done it myself. So it was more like I needed to trust my gut a bit more.
What sorts of
Um,
things were those?
a great example is building the website. I hired someone to do it. I definitely could have done that myself, but I was nervous to have all those pieces, tech pieces come into play. But now that I've had to run it myself since then, I'm like, oh, totally could have saved the money and done this. He was great, but I could have done it myself. I think the biggest one, though, was probably the legalese of everything from setting up the company fine, but like making sure that the products are protected, getting the filings in, dealing with the copyrights. I enlisted a lot of people to help with all that, and I paid for professionals. And I should have trusted my gut that I could have navigated it and figured it out. I wish I had done that because, number one, I think I would have learned very quickly some stuff that I would like to accomplish. And additionally, I would have saved some money.
Wow, what kind of tools would you recommend for women who are looking for resources to help them with that process?
This is going to sound terrible because it's going to sound so simple. The government offers a lot of helpful tools. It's annoying, I know, but like you just have to read them. They just look like they're from 1988. But eventually, when I got my readers on and I sat down, I was like, I feel like I can do this. And I'm so old that I printed a lot of stuff. I created a binder. I was like, I'm reading through this, I'm getting it done. But in the copyright office, you would think that there are these very harsh Harry Potter-like characters living back there. They were so lovely. They emailed me numerous times saying, "We need you to tweak this. Can you change this? This you did this wrong, but we're going to change it for you. Just confirm that's okay." And then they worked out. Same with how I'm dealing with the trademark office now. They've been very helpful. So I think I went in with this perception that I needed experts and all these people, and that this was going to be a gnarly process, and it wasn't. It wasn't nearly as bad as it turned out to be.
That's so great to hear and not what I would have expected at all. So, yeah, if there's anyone else in a similar position, just go Google your local trademark office. And it sounds like they're really super helpful. And I imagine just as inspired by your story as I am from hearing that your son wouldn't be able to learn these tasks himself to you pushing through that and creating tools so that not only he could, but so that other people with children could help their kids acquire these skills as well. I mean, it's just so impressive. And then building this business alongside a full-time job. And did you mention that you're also a single mom?
No, I didn't. I am a single mom, and it makes it sound like it's such a heavy burden. But I have to say, my kids we're a pretty good trio. They sometimes gang up on me. That can be a little annoying, but we're a pretty good trio. We get along really well. And I have to say, part of it is because my son has advanced so much. I don't know if I would be this functional of a person if he was still in diapers and self-injurious and not able to shower. And so I feel very blessed that he was able to bring himself to a level of functionality and continues to grow. I mean, next up is going to be learning to shave, which is a whole other beast. But I have to tell you, I feel very blessed and very lucky every day that they're so wonderful and that we have such an amazing unit.
So we're going to have a Clean Plus Comfort shaving line coming out soon.
Yes. Again, I am a method developer. I don't know if that's a term, but I'm coining it now, very much like method acting. I'm in it. So as I'm in it, if I have to create adaptive tools to help him become successful, I am not a gatekeeper. I will 100% share it with everyone.
Such an inspiring story. How can people find out more about Clean Plus Comfort and order some of these tools for themselves?
So we have a website, www.cleanpluscomfort.com. We are also on social media, slowly working on building that up, which is Clean Plus Comfort, both on Instagram, TikTok, And we occasionally will do blog posts also on the website, which then link to other groups that we're working with.
Amazing. Stephanie Angelides, Clean Plus Comfort founder, thank you so much for sharing your incredibly inspiring story today. If anyone has any tools that they think could help Stephanie, any experience, especially in navigating how she can get these products out on the web, especially the shower tools, without triggering all those warnings and getting her booted off of social media, please reach out. Thank you so much for sharing your story today. It's just absolutely inspirational.
Thank you. I loved being here. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks again to Stephanie Angelides for sharing her story and for reminding us that refusing to accept no can be the very first step in changing lives and changing the world. To explore Clean Plus Comfort's adaptive hygiene tools, books, and bundles, visit cleanpluscomfort.com. And don't forget, head to mygreatpivot.com and click on Founder Wishlist at the top if you'd like to help Stephanie and founders like her. If you have the time and skills to fulfill a wish, we'd love to make a connection. My Great Pivot is a production of the Female Founders Project. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, share, subscribe, and leave a review. And if you'd like to share your own entrepreneurial journey, we'd love to hear from you at thefemalefoundersproject.com. Thanks for listening and keep innovating.